Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're trying to clear up some confusion wading into the world of academic research summaries. If you've ever stared at a pile of papers, systematic review, scoping review, umbrella review, and thought, what's the actual difference? Well, you're in the right place. The whole idea of evidence-based practice, EBP, it's everywhere now, isn't it? Medicine, education, you name it. And that's great, but it's also created this sort of jungle of research summaries. The terms get confusing. Sometimes they're used vaguely, even wrongly. So our goal today, to give you a kind of map, we want to break down the most common types of literature reviews using a clear structure. Hopefully you'll walk away feeling you can quickly figure out what kind of research you're looking at and whether it fits your needs.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this need for structure, it's actually quite a modern problem. It really stems from some frustration back in the early days of EBP. Think back to the 1990s. People started realizing that the old way of doing medical reviews just wasn't cutting it. They were often, well, a bit of a mess, frankly. Unsystematic. Authors might just rely on what they remembered or the books on their shelf. Formal statistics, rarely used.
Right, so you'd read these big review articles, but you couldn't really trust the conclusions.
Exactly. They were susceptible to bias. Sometimes they were just plain wrong because they hadn't gathered all the evidence properly.
And didn't someone flag this problem way earlier? I'm thinking of Archie Cochrane.
Ah, yes, the epidemiologist. His critique became quite famous. He essentially took the medical profession to task for not managing its own knowledge effectively. He said something like, it's surely a great criticism of our profession that we have not organized a critical summary, adapted periodically, of all relevant randomized controlled trials. Quite scathing.
Wow, so he was calling for systematic summaries way back then.
He was. And that call to action, that criticism, it directly spurred the creation of the Cochrane collaboration in 1992. They really set the benchmark, the gold standard for what a rigorous, modern, systematic review should involve.
Okay, but here's a little historical twist I found interesting. Cochrane is seen as the modern champion, but the basic idea isn't totally new, is it? I read something about James Lind, the scurvy trial guy from the 18th century.
That's right. It's fascinating. Lind, who did the first known randomized controlled trial, or RCT, well, about 6 years after publishing his scurvy results, he wrote about needing to, and this is his phrase, remove a great deal of rubbish before you could set the subject in a clear and proper light.
Remove the rubbish. So even back then, he understood you needed a system. Collect the studies, sift through them, synthesize the good stuff.
Precisely. That core idea, gather, filter, summarize, it's been around conceptually for centuries.
But we only really nailed down the formal terms and methods in the last, 30 years or so?
That's about right. And now we have so many variations, slightly different approaches, that we absolutely need a common language to tell them apart. A diagnostic tool, if you like.
Okay, let's get into that language. The source material we looked at uses a framework called SALSA. Tell us about that.
SALSA. It's an acronym, and it's designed to help us look past the label an author might stick on their review. Because honestly, just relying on the title, systematic review, literature review, it doesn't always tell you the whole story. There's too much inconsistency, too much overlap. You really have to look at how they did it.
Right, look under the hood, so to speak. So how does SALSA help us do that? What does it stand for?
Okay, so SALSA breaks down the review process into 4 key parts. First, S is for search. How thoroughly did they look for relevant studies? Was it just one database or a really wide, comprehensive search?
Okay, search. Makes sense.
Then A is for appraisal. Did they formally assess the quality of the studies they found? Check for bias, that kind of thing.
Appraisal. Got it.
The second S is synthesis. How did they actually combine the findings? Was it just described in words, like a narrative? Or did they use statistics, like a meta-analysis? Maybe just a table.
Synthesis. So how the results are put together.
Exactly. And the final A is analysis. What's the end product? What are they trying to achieve? Are they making recommendations for practice, just describing the literature, or maybe even proposing a new theory?
Search, appraisal, synthesis, analysis. SALSA. I like that. It's like a practical checklist.
It is. And the authors argue it's really the only reliable way to figure out what kind of review you're actually looking at. Forget the title, check the SALSA.
So let's use it. Let's walk through some common review types and see how their SALSA profiles differ. Where should we start? Maybe the top standard. The systematic review.
Good place to start. The systematic review is often called the benchmark, precisely because it demands high standards across all 4 SALSA elements. Transparency is key. For search, the aim is typically exhaustive, really comprehensive, often following strict protocols like Prisma to document every single step.
Okay, very thorough search. What about appraisal?
Appraisal is absolutely crucial. It's not optional. They must assess the quality and risk of bias in the included studies. And that quality assessment might even decide whether a study gets included in the final analysis or not. It's all about minimizing bias.
Right, hence the gold standard label.
Yeah.
So if it meets that standard, what should I expect from the analysis? What's the output?
The analysis should be really clear and practical. It typically tells you two main things. First, here's what we know, based on the best available evidence, often with recommendations for practice. And second, just as important, here's what we don't know. It maps out the uncertainties and suggests where future research should focus.
Okay, very structured. Now let's contrast that with something we see all the time. The plain old literature review. That term seems so broad.
It is very broad, and often it's the least systematic type. A literature review can just mean any published piece that looks at recent or current literature on a topic. The key weakness is it often lacks a clear, stated intention to be comprehensive in its search or rigorous in its appraisal and synthesis. The salsa components can be quite weak or just not described.
And that means the conclusions could be unreliable, right? Because they might have missed important studies.
Exactly. There's a real risk of selection bias. Either they unintentionally miss key papers, or potentially an author might consciously or unconsciously choose only the studies that back up their own viewpoint.
Without that transparency in the search and appraisal, you just don't know.
We don't. Now, another one that causes confusion is the critical review. The name sounds rigorous.
Yeah, critical sounds like it should be very systematic. But it's different, isn't it? How does its synthesis and analysis differ?
Its main goal isn't just to summarize what's known, like a systematic review. A critical review aims for conceptual innovation. It definitely involves researching the literature, often extensively, and evaluating its quality critically. But it uses that as a launch pad. The analysis, the output, is usually a new hypothesis or a theoretical model. It's trying to shift understanding or propose a new way of thinking, rather than give a definitive answer for practice today.
Ah, okay. So the interpretation, maybe even the subjectivity, is actually part of its purpose.
In a way, yes. The fact that it relies on interpretation and might not follow the strict systematic steps of, say, a Cochrane review that's both its limitation and its strength. You need that interpretive element to develop new theories or models. You wouldn't use a critical review to decide on a specific treatment, but it might spark a whole new research direction.
That distinction is really helpful. Okay, let's tackle the meta-analysis. This one often gets mistaken for being the same thing as the systematic review, but it's not, is it?
No, it's a common confusion. Think of it this way. If a systematic review is the whole process of finding, appraising, and bringing together evidence,
Then the meta-analysis is just one tool used within that process, specifically for the synthesis part.
exactly right. Meta-analysis is a statistical technique. It's used to combine the numerical results from multiple quantitative studies, usually trials, to get a single, more precise estimate of an effect.
Like finding the average effect of a drug across several studies.
Precisely. And its power is that it can take a bunch of small studies, maybe none of which found a statistically significant result on their own, and combine them into a larger pool of data that does give a significant result. It synthesizes the evidence quantitatively. That's
Okay.
super useful for decision makers, gives a clearer signal.
But it has that famous limitation, the apples and oranges issue. What's the catch?
The catch is homogeneity, similarity. For the statistics to be meaningful, the studies you combine must be sufficiently similar. Similar populations, similar interventions, similar ways of measuring the outcome. If you start mixing apples and oranges studies that are too different, the combined number might look precise, but it's essentially meaningless. You've averaged things that shouldn't be averaged.
Right, precision doesn't equal accuracy if the inputs are wrong. Okay, that covers the sort of high rigor end and the conceptual end. What about reviews designed for speed? Decision makers often need answers faster than a full systematic review allows.
Absolutely. The timelines in policy or healthcare can be tight, and that pressure led to the development of the rapid review. The goal here is to use the principles of systematic reviews being structured, being transparent, but to do it much faster.
How do they speed it up? Where do they cut corners on the salsa steps?
They have to make deliberate compromises, and they should tell you what they did. For example, to speed up the search, they might limit the number of databases searched or use broader search terms that might miss some studies. For appraisal, maybe they only assess the quality of the best few studies or use a simplified checklist instead of a deep dive into bias for every single paper. They might also streamline the data extraction.
So it's a trade-off. faster answers, but potentially a higher risk of bias because you haven't been as exhaustive or as rigorous.
That's the core trade-off. You gain speed, but you lose some certainty. The absolute key for a rapid review to be trustworthy is transparency. The authors must clearly state which steps they shortcutted and acknowledge the potential impact on the findings, the increased risk of bias. Without that honesty, it's not very useful.
Makes sense. Okay, what about scoping reviews? I tend to think of these as mapping the territory before you decide to explore further.
That's an excellent way to put it. A scoping review aims to give a preliminary look at the sheer size and scope of the available research literature on a topic. It tries to answer questions like, how much research is out there? What kind of studies exist? What are the main concepts or gaps? It often includes ongoing research, too.
So its main focus is on the search component of SALSA, finding out what exists.
Primarily, yes. The search is usually broad, but here's the crucial difference, especially regarding appraisal. Scoping reviews typically do not formally assess the quality of the studies they find.
Okay, so they tell you that studies exist, but not necessarily whether those studies are any good.
Exactly. The focus is breadth, not depth of quality. And because there's no quality assessment, the findings of a scoping review shouldn't be used to make recommendations for practice or policy.
Its value is different. It helps you decide if it's even worthwhile doing a full systematic review later on, or where the gaps are.
Precisely. It informs research priorities and helps avoid duplication of effort. It tells you if the terrain is worth a deeper look. Got it. One more major type, the umbrella review. The name suggests it covers a lot.
It does. An umbrella review doesn't look at primary studies directly. Instead, it compiles evidence from multiple existing reviews, usually systematic reviews.
So it's a review of reviews.
That's the concept. Imagine you have several Cochrane reviews on different treatments for, say, lower back pain. An umbrella review would synthesize the findings from all those separate reviews into one single accessible document.
What's the big advantage there?
Speed and breadth for the reader. It gives you a quick, high-level overview of what multiple systematic reviews have already concluded on a broad topic. It's a great starting point if you're new to a complex field.
Seems very useful. Is there a major limitation?
The main limitation is logistical. It depends entirely on those underlying reviews already existing. You can't do an umbrella review if the narrower systematic reviews haven't been done yet, or if they're of poor quality. Its quality is capped by the quality of the reviews it includes. This SALSA framework really does help make sense of it all. As you said, the labels aren't always reliable. Few types have absolutely rigid rules, and they can overlap.
Right. The typology isn't perfect boxes, but SALSA gives you the tools to look at the process, the search, appraisal, synthesis, and analysis, and understand what you're actually getting.
Which leads to the practical application for you, the listener. When you get a review, the first question isn't just, is this a gold standard systematic review? It's more nuanced, isn't it?
It really is. The question should be, is this review fit for my purpose?
Right, fit for purpose.
Yeah. So if you need a quick answer for a policy brief now, a well-done, transparent, rapid review might be more fit for purpose than waiting 2 years for a perfect systematic review. If you need to understand the landscape before funding research, a scoping review fits the purpose. If you want to generate new ideas, maybe a critical review is best. SALSA helps you match the review's strengths and weaknesses to your specific need.
So the big takeaway here seems to be, don't just trust the title. Always try to look for the description of the methods. Look for evidence of the SALSA steps. If the authors are clear about what they did, even if they limited the search in a rapid review, or focused on interpretation in a critical review, then you can make an informed judgment about its value for you.
Couldn't said it better myself. Transparency about the process is everything. And maybe a final thought for you to consider based on all this. Think about your own field, your own work. Given the different strengths of these review types, systematic, rapid, scoping, umbrella, which specific type do you think would be most effective right now for synthesizing the knowledge you need, and why? What are the constraints, time, resources, the type of question that make one type a better fit than another in your specific context?
That's a really practical question to ponder, matching the tool to the job. Thanks for helping us navigate that complex landscape today.
My pleasure. It's an important area to get clear on.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.